This story is called My Own Private Fears.
As a young boy, I'd crawl into my Snoopy sheets, eat flavored ice cream from my Snoopy snow cone machine, and stare up at an image framed over my bed. It was made from flannel, glued onto a burlap background. My name and its biblical meaning. Daniel, God is my judge. With that kind of ominous messaging, it's no wonder I grew up with a few fears. Here are my top 5 for those keeping score. 1. Being misunderstood. This probably stems from being pulled out in the hallway by Mr. Elders over that drawing of Lisa Coe as a fat nurse. I hate being misunderstood. I really think I meant that for fun, but obviously it hurt her feelings. When I was a kid, Sesame Street really did a number on me. Sure, it taught me numbers and letters of the alphabet, but it also instilled a fear of being misunderstood, or not believed when I'm telling the truth. Big Bird had an elephant pal named Mr. Snuffleupagus. We, the home viewers, could see their warm relationship, but whenever Big Bird left to find his human friends so that he could introduce them to his elephant friend, Mr. Snuffleupagus would wander off before they returned. That left our favorite 6-year-old yellow bird looking like a liar, as if he was making all this up. For years, the Children's Television Workshop kept this dogshit storyline going, and I hated every minute of it. As it turns out, other children of the 1970s were also deeply disturbed by it. 14 years later, the producers found that this plotline might have a negative effect on kids. If adult humans wouldn't believe the word of Big Bird, what did that mean for children? What if kids were to report something as horrific as abuse? Would their parents scoff at them just because there were no eyewitnesses? They finally did the right thing, and in 1985, they let Mr. Snuffleupagus out of the closet. Fear number 2, sliding my notes. As a conservative Baptist teen, occasionally I would sing special music in church, which is what musical religious kids had before American Idol. But at Granville Baptist, there was to be no applause unless the singer was under the age of 10. Clapping, remember, was considered upper body intercourse. As a teenager, I wasn't performing for the attention. I wanted to sing for the Lord. So I learned how to play O Calvary's Lamb, written in the key of C, so it was easy enough to accompany myself. An hour before the service, I was rehearsing my special number when a shadowy figure of a mustached man appeared in the doorframe. It was the worship leader, Dave Smelser. "That's nice, Dan," he said, interrupting my rehearsal. I jumped. "But," he continued, "do you plan to slide your notes like that?" "I'm just singing it the way Sandy Patty performs it," I said. "Romans 12:2, he continued. "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Do you think you're singing your song by sliding your notes all over the place is the mark of a true believer? Or do you think you might be conforming to this world?" It was a leading question, for sure, but I refused to take the bait. I thought for a second, then quipped, "It might be, conforming to Sandy Patty. Sure, maybe. But the world? No." Dave narrowed his eyes, then turned and exited without another word. He had said his piece. That evening, he and I both got what we wanted. I sang the song the way it was supposed to sound, cascading notes and all, and he got the satisfaction of reprimanding a nice 16-year-old boy who wanted to sing about the death and resurrection of Calvary's Lamb to an audience of 200 people who would most definitely not clap at the end of the song. We both won. I went on to meet Sandy Patty backstage at the legendary Beacon Theater when I was 26. I interviewed her for a religious website, told her about my teenage note sliding, and asked to sing a few bars of Another Time, Another Place with her. We duetted for a minute. So really, I won. Number 3, cops. Police scare me, which is odd, coming from someone who enjoys so much white privilege. When I'm pulled over, I'm not worried I might be killed. I'm terrified of being falsely imprisoned. As a kid, I was obsessed with detective work thanks to the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew books. I specifically wanted to be a teen sleuth. They drove around in convertible roadsters and had male pals with the name Chet and female chums named George. If that wasn't teen fiction's first transgendered woman, I don't know who was. Go Carolyn Keene. So progressive. I would play Hardy Boys with my cousin Greg in the backyard of Aunt Beth's house. We had a red notebook to keep track of evidence and badges we made out of American Tourister luggage bags. Everything I did as a child had to be full production, which has come in handy considering my career. Anyway, cops scare me, which is why I jumped out of my car and ran back to the squad car to pronounce my innocence the first time one pulled me over. 4. Shamu. Derek took me on a date to Catalina Island, which quickly became one of my favorite places on Earth. Miles off the coast of Long Beach, California, is an island that's 90 miles around and 90% unpopulated. Basically, it's just the small 6-block city of Avalon. We rented a jet ski for an hour. A guy named Cal gave us instructions on how far we could take them in the ocean. Not further than the buoy markers, about a mile offshore. And if you happen to flip the jet ski, turn it back over immediately, said Cal as he picked seaweed from his chest hair. They fill with water in about 10 seconds and sink to the bottom of the ocean floor, and you'd be responsible for reimbursing our loss. Plus, you'll just be floating out there for a while in your life jackets until we realize you need a rescue. And basically, this is the Pacific Ocean. You're shark bait. This is their home, not yours. Derek and I turned to each other and gulped, but got on the jet ski. We were 2 grown men in our 30s on a date, and neither one of us wanted to look weak. For the next half hour, we drove out to the buoy markers and, of course, way beyond them. We were probably 2 miles offshore when we thought this would make an incredible picture. In the middle of the ocean, an island way off in the distance, the coastline of California not even visible. Truly, the middle of nowhere. I had purchased a waterproof disposable camera and wanted to get the perfect shot. Derek jumped off the jet ski and swam out a few feet and asked me to toss him the camera in the Ziploc bag. I did, and he took a cool photo of me pretending to drive, even though it was clear I wasn't moving. Then he swam back and said, "Your turn to get one of me." I wasn't quite so sure about putting my turkey thighs in the water on display for all of the sea life. But fair is fair. I had a cool photo, he deserved one too. I swam out and took his picture as quickly as I could, and I paddled back and climbed back on. And I was grateful to be alive and thrilled we didn't tip over the jet ski in the process. We still had 20 minutes until we were due back, so we just sat out in the ocean and pondered life's great mysteries. Something about the gentle rocking of the ocean's waves brought out the philosophical questioning in me. My friend Indu thinks we should celebrate death-iversarities as much as we celebrate anniversaries. Did I ever tell you about the time Chris and I went to a church service and Diane Cannon slain my friend Charles in the spirit? He was out cold for 2 hours on his back. Do you think the Holy Spirit was really behind that? What is Satan's last name? His last question was interrupted when an 8-ton, 18-foot killer whale came to the surface of the water, only about 10 feet from our puny jet ski. I didn't take time to weigh and measure it. I'm estimating based upon my scientific Google search. All I know is I saw the whale surface behind Derek as he was going on and on about Satan's possible last name. The eye of the killer whale blinked before it descended back underneath the waves. We had definitely made eye contact, but I wasn't about to stick around and trade fish recipes. Without warning, I turned and floored it. I went from 0 to 50 mphs in whatever few seconds it took. Derek let out a bone-rattling scream as he grabbed my life jacket to keep from flying off the back of the ski. As I tore across the surface of the deep, he shouted, "What the hell?" Though he probably didn't say hell. "Killer whale!" I shouted back. "Look behind us!" He turned and caught a glimpse of the massive creature coming back up for another look. I never turned back, fearing I might turn into a pillar of salt. We got back to the dock, and I couldn't get off that jet ski fast enough. I jumped off the machine and tore off my life vest, throwing it down and storming off with all the overdramatic performance of a Sally Field role. I had never been more terrified in my life. Later, people who are smart would remind me that killer whales are neither killers nor whales. They are actually dolphins, and usually rather friendly to humans. But do you think I had an encyclopedia out there with me in the Pacific Ocean? Do you? Yeah, let me thumb through this science journal and research this 18-foot sea monster before I decide to book it out of there, nearly killing my date. No. 5. Teenagers. Teens scare the shit out of me. I don't know why. Maybe because it looks like they're getting special radioactive power from their glowing phones. One-on-one, I'm not necessarily frightened of them, but they travel in hooded packs, and it seems they can turn on civilization on a dime. They really do scare the living shit out of me. Obviously, I was a scary teen myself. It took several more years for me to dial up a celebrity after the hell I put Steve Urkel through, letting his phone ring for 30 minutes like that. But I continued to write to the stars, with Jana collecting all of my autographs during my junior year in Brazil. But during my senior year, I got a package from Phil Hartman, the greatest SNL performer of all time, all due respect to Kristen Wiig and Jan Hooks. I had written to him and requested an autograph, and included a questionnaire printed out on my dot matrix printer, careful to remove the bubbled edges without tearing the paper. The survey asked about his favorite book, his religion, his hobbies, and his favorite TV shows, besides SNL. He was nice enough to return my questionnaire and send me an 8x10. A few weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon, I called NBC. "Saturday Night Live, please." One moment, then another voice. "SNL. Phil Hartman, please." "One sec." "Hello?" said an unfamiliar man's voice. "Hi. Phil Hartman, please?" I said, trying to disguise my quavering voice. "Speaking." It took a few seconds for me to realize I was actually speaking to Phil. In Michigan, we weren't sophisticated enough to say, "Speaking." We'd say, "This is Dan, how you doing?" Another reason I didn't recognize his voice is because, as a master impressionist, I had never really heard Phil Hartman's regular voice. He was always playing Bill Clinton or Unfrozen Caveman Lawyer or Troy McClure on The Simpsons. But I had no idea he kind of sounded like a California surfer. Immediately, I lost my cool. "Oh, hi, Mr. Hartman. I know you don't remember me, but my name is Dan, and you signed a picture for me a few weeks ago and filled out my survey about your favorite things, and I guess I'm just kind of wondering what you meant by, no, you're the funny one on my autograph. Did I say something funny in my letter? I appreciate it." He cut me off. "Dan, the joke's on you. I write that on all the pictures I sign." "How are you, buddy? I enjoyed filling out the questionnaire." He must have sensed that I was a nervous little 18-year-old man-child. For the next few minutes, my head was spinning. I talked quickly, not wanting to take up too much of this man's time. My dad walked into the room and asked me to sweep the garage. I covered the phone and mouthed, "Not now. I'm on the phone with Phil Hartman," which probably looked like I said, "Got towels. I dig a hole with authoritarian." About 15 minutes into our conversation, my breathing returned to normal. Phil didn't seem to mind. In fact, he said that he was just sitting in his office with nothing to do until dress rehearsal at 8 p.m. SNL always records the rehearsal in case something happens with the 11:30 p.m. live broadcast. So for the next hour, I chatted with Phil on the phone, as if he were a friend. He did voices for me, from all of his favorite characters, which cracked me up. Eventually, I even managed to say one or two witty things that made him laugh, genuinely. For the next 6 months at school, I was the comedy god who had made Phil Hartman laugh. It was a crowning achievement on what had been a very challenging 6 years of junior high and high school. The next year, I dared to call him back. I missed him, but got his answering machine. A few hours later, I got home and hit play on my machine, only to hear a rambling, strange recording. This is Frank Sinatra, old Blue Eyes. I'm in New York, state of mind, just thinking about my old pal. It's a terrible Sinatra impersonation. But I kept listening to the very good Sinatra impersonation, squinting into my mirror, trying to imagine which friend of mine knew how to do a great Sinatra impersonation. Suddenly, the voice on the machine switched to a surfer light. Just kidding. Hey, Dan, it's Phil. How you doing, buddy? Of course I remember you. I don't talk to a lot of people on the phone. How the hell are you? Give me a call back. I called them back, and this time, more self-assured, I kept him on the line for 90 minutes, a half hour longer than last year when I was just a silly, nervous high schooler. Years later, when his wife shot and killed Phil, then herself a few hours later, I was devastated. He was only 49 years old. I cried harder and for more days than I'd ever done before. His death touched me more than other deaths had because of the kindness he had showed me. It felt like we were really friends. I went on the local news and showed my questionnaire and signed picture. Sadly, I had lost the answering machine tape of the message he had left in the voice of Sinatra. I didn't know what to do with my grief, other than to go on TV and talk about it. Victoria Jackson, an SNL cast member with Phil, once drove me past his house. I had seen it so many times on the national news, but it made me so heartbroken I never drove by again. I avoided that part of Encino from then on. At the entrance to the Groundlings Theater, where Rajiv and I filmed our pilot for The Captain, there's a plaque reading, "The Groundlings dedicate this theater to the memory of Phil Hartman." Every time I looked at it, I remembered the man who took hours out of his day at Saturday Night Live to chat with a nervous teenager who wanted advice on how to grow up and become a writer. To this day, if I treat people well on a movie set or at a public event, no matter who they are or what their status may be, it is because of the great life lesson I learned in my late teens, from the grace and kindness shown to me by Phil Hartman.